This is our saw stop, and this is the guard system. And so to put the guard on, the blade needs to be up first off. So you raise it up here in the front of the saw. This one raises the saw blade up and down, okay? And the one on the side over here tilts the blade at a 45-degree angle. So please don't use that one, it'll make me angry. Okay, I had a student one time who, she got all of her stuff laid out to make these cabinets, and she had like 7 or 8 cabinets, and she was doing the face frame, so she had like 25 pieces of wood. She was making her final cut, and somebody had tilted the blade 2 degrees. And so she ran all those boards through, and then when she went to make her face frames, nothing would come together because somebody had tilted the blade and hadn't straightened it back up. Okay? So it's a big deal if you turn something. I'll have students turn the wheel and they're like, nothing's happening because they can't see it. They don't know what happened. And they're like, I guess this one doesn't work. Well, they work, you just didn't see what happened, and so you ruined stuff. So in order to put the guard in, it goes right here. There's a little lever right here. You look down in, you lift this lever up, and then this opens up. You just slide this right down into place right here and lock the lever back in. Then when you put this in, you have to tilt this so that the bottom goes in first, or the back goes in first, and then you set it down in, and then you have to check. So you can see back here on this one, it didn't drop in. Okay, and so it's up high, and so you have to pick it back up, get it to drop down in so it's flush on the front and back. Okay, that's how you put the guard on. It's pretty easy. So you should never cut anything without the guard. If there are cuts that need to be made without the guard, I will make them for you. Okay, so if they're one of my advanced students, sometimes I'll let you cut without the guard, and I'll want to watch you to make sure that you're making a safe cut. But there really aren't a lot of cuts for which we might not need the guard. But we do some when we do a jig and some of that kind of stuff. And so this first project that you guys are going to be building is this, it's that little stool, and it has the angled cuts, and so we'll cut that with a jig. And the jig won't work with the guard, so we have to take the guard off. And I'll show you how to do that and make those cuts safely. Alright, so the table saw has 2 main accidents, right? One is getting cut, which on this saw you can't do, right? Because the blade will disappear. If it's running and you touch it, it goes away. But the other one you can do, and that's a kickback, okay? And you already saw the video with Idiot Boy getting kicked back and how that happens, but he didn't really explain all the causes of kickback. And there are a lot of causes for kickback, and you need to know what they are. So, all kickbacks are caused by the back and top of the blade. The front of the blade right here just cuts the wood. Because what happens is the hook on the blade grabs the wood, tries to push it through the metal table, can't do it, and so it cuts. But when you grab it on the top or the back, it just grabs the wood and throws it at you. Okay? So what happens is when you're running a board through the saw, it leaves the blade path, because that's where it got cut. But if the wood comes away from the fence, then it hits the back of the blade and it can cause a kickback. It doesn't happen every time. So sometimes I'll have students come and I'll point out that their wood's coming away from the fence and they'll start to panic and want to let go of their wood. Please don't do that. Okay? So Idiot Boy talked about, oh, I hear people say that they could feel a kickback coming and then they could just hold it. Well, that's because he didn't understand all the causes of kickback. So one of the causes of kickback is wood that pinches the blade. Sometimes when you're running wood through and you cut through what are called lignins. They're like tendons in your arm. They're what hold the wood in place. So when you cut through a lignin, sometimes the wood will bend. And so you have a piece of wood, you joint it, and it's all straight, and then you cut it. When it comes out on the other side, it's crooked. And that's because you cut through the lignins. Okay? There's nothing you can do about it. It just happens sometimes, and some of the lignins aren't straight, so sometimes it'll bend. Well, if you're cutting a piece of wood and the lignins bend, it'll pinch the blade. And so it'll start to pinch on the back of the blade, and it'll get harder and harder to push. Okay? And that's where people say, I can feel it kickback coming, and I just hold it. Well, that's exactly what you do. If you start to put a piece of wood through and it gets harder and harder to push, you just hold it. Hold it still. Don't keep pushing. And then you just take your knee and you turn it off right here. This is your on-off switch right here in the front of the saw. Okay? And so, you get here to the front of the saw, this is how you turn it on. You pull it up when it's plugged in. It's not plugged in right now. And turn it on and just push it in. Okay? So, if you get a piece of wood, you're pushing it through and it starts to stick, it's not going through, then you just take your knee and you just tap the off button and you hold it still until the blade comes to a stop. Come get me and I'll help you fix it. Okay? So, wood that pinches the blade can cause a kickback. And so, for that reason, your left hand should never go past the front of the blade. Because once you cut the wood, right, essentially once you cut the wood, you have two pieces of wood. And if you push here, you're just going to push this into the back of the blade and cause a kickback. Does that make sense? So never have your left hand go past the front of the guard. It stays right here all the time. Okay? So that's two. So wood that comes away from the fence and wood that pinches the blade. Those here are two main causes of kickback. Now, the reason wood comes away from the fence can vary. One, and the most common reason, and the dumbest one for us, right, is if the wood's not straight when you start with. So before you run a piece of wood through the table saw, it should have a flat surface, so when you put it on the table, it doesn't rock like this. Because if it rocks like this, and you push it through and you're weighted here, and you rock it here, it pushes it into the blade, and that can cause a kickback. Okay? Notice I said can, as opposed to will. Because 90% of the time, that slight movement won't. But on the occasion when it does, it really hurts. It can be very painful. Okay? And while I have all my fingers, I have been hit with a kickback. And I have to admit I cried. It hit really hard. Okay? So, kickbacks can be really painful, so you want to be very careful. So if the wood's not straight on the edge here, then if it has a high point in the middle, it'll rock around that. Well, of course, when you rock around it, you push it into the blade. So wood that's not straight will cause it to come away from the fence and hit into the blade and can cause a kickback. Wood that's not flat can cause a kickback. Okay? Wood that you don't keep against the fence. So a lot of times students are pushing wood through the fence or through the saw, and true to the instructions of their mother to stay away from danger, right? They want to always put their hand way over here by the fence as far away from the blade as they can get it. Because that seems like that would be the safest place. But it's not. When you push on this corner, that corner goes that way. So you always want to be in the center or to the left side of center when you're pushing, so that the back right-hand corner maintains pressure against the fence. So when you're pushing wood through the saw, you're really pushing it at a slight angle into the saw. And you're ricocheting it off the fence the whole time. So you want to make sure that it stays up against this fence when you make your cut. If the wood stays against the fence, you're going to get a good cut. Okay? So when you run wood through the table saw, you want to make sure that your hand is in contact with the wood, and I usually use my thumb on the left side of the center of the piece of wood that you're working with. Okay?
Use both hands?
Yeah, we use both hands. I'll get to that in just a second. But yeah, use both hands. Okay, so that's another cause for kickback. Wood that you take backwards through the saw will cause a kickback. Okay, so you never want to feed it backwards through the saw or back it up during a cut. So if you start to cut the board and you can feel it pinching on the blade, the worst thing you can do is try to pull it backwards a little. Okay, because that just feeds to it and it'll take off and hit you. Alright, so you just hang on to that sucker if it feels like it's going to kick back there. So wood going the wrong way through the saw can cause a kickback. Okay? Wood that you don't keep down on the table can cause a kickback. So sometimes you get a long piece of wood, and they're pushing it through, they put too much pressure on the back end, the front end comes up, and now we're hitting the blade up here towards the top. And the top wants to throw it back at you, right? So that can cause a kickback. So you want to make sure the wood stays flat on the table so we don't cause a kickback. Okay? Kickbacks are the most common accident that we have on our table saw. But I didn't have any last year. Okay, the year before I think I had 3. Of all the students that run through my shop all year long, which is probably 100 students, we cut thousands of boards with 3 kickbacks. So it's not very common. It just can happen. It gets more common if you get stupid. So please don't get stupid. Just do what I tell you. Okay? So once you have jointed and you have a straight edge along your fence, here, when you push your wood through, you always stand to the left side of your wood. Okay? You never stand on the right side because you'll have a tendency to push into the blade, which causes a kickback. And while you're safe behind the fence and it will hit somebody else back here, that's always a good shot. Oops, sorry. Right? We're not allowed to do that, so don't do it. Okay? So you stand on the left side of your fence. Your left hand should, I put my thumb on top and my fingers facing me. So you curl your hand backwards like this, thumb on top, and then you hold it so it runs against your fingers as it goes through here against the fence. Okay? Your right hand should be in contact on the left side of center, and then you just push it against the fence all the way through, and you need to go all the way through to the outfeed table. So here's your next cause of kickback. Wood that's left floating between the fence and the blade. So sometimes students will push it, and you get right past here, the wood's all the way cut, right? And they don't push it all the way out, and they just let go of it. Well, now it's sitting between the two of these, and that little bit of friction from the blade starts it bouncing off the fence. Pretty soon, twang, and it hits you. Okay? So wood left floating between the fence and the blade can cause a kickback. Don't leave it there. Now, wood left on the left side, it's not wedged between the fence and the blade, is not a problem. We don't care about that. Okay? It's just sitting there. The only time that can be a problem if it's a really thin piece and it gets in between the guard here, and it wedges between the guard and the fence, then that can get to be a little bit of a problem. But the guard is designed, it has a little hook down here, so if the board shoots, it'll go up inside of here and stop it most of the time. Okay? So, if we get a piece of wood that's stuck between the two of those, please don't try to take it out. Hit the stop button, let the blade and the saw come to a complete stop, and then you can take it out of there. Okay? Otherwise, leave the wood alone here. So the two saw stops that have been set off in my shop that are hanging up on the front board, they're caused from people who won't leave this wood alone. They didn't run their hands through the front. They reached in from the side to get this wood, and they hit the side of the blade and set off the saw stop. And so the teeth came down through sideways, and that's how they got cut. Okay? So if they'd come in the front, they would have got less of a cut than they did by hitting it on the side. Okay? So if you have wood left on the left side, just leave it alone. We don't care about that wood. It doesn't need to be picked up. The next piece of wood, we'll put it out. If it really bothers you, it needs to be moved because it's bothering you, you can take a piece of wood and push it through on the side to get it out of the way. Okay? So those are your kickback concerns and the things that you need to know about kickbacks. The other kind of accident that happens on a table saw are cuts. Okay? So assuming that you had a saw of your dad's at home and you could get cut, this is how cuts happen. There are two ways. Number one, you stick your fingers in the blade and you get cut. And that sounds stupid that nobody would do it, but they do, because they start to focus on other things. When you're pushing a board through the saw, you should be watching the fence to make sure it stays on the fence. You don't watch the blade. The blade doesn't move and you know where it is, so you don't have to worry about that. When you start pushing, you make sure your hand is never moving towards the blade in the cutting path. So my hand will run right here next to the blade. There's nothing dangerous here next to the blade. Okay? So I can run my hand right through there next to the blade and be safe. My left hand, although it may be in the cutting path, never moves. Okay? I put it down on the table, hold it right there, and push it through, and I never move it towards the blade. Okay? I only hold my wood against the fence and down onto the table. Okay? So that's how cuts happen. If the guard's in place, your hand will hit the guard, and that will trigger something in your mind that says, ooh, I'm about to get cut. And you'll stop, I hope. Okay? So your hand should never hit the guard, but if it does, you're in the wrong place. So you stop. Okay? So as you're running stuff through the table saw, the other type of cut that will happen, or could happen, are through kickbacks, and they only happen when you don't have the guard in place. So if you don't have the guard in place, and you have your hand out here and the board catches and kicks, it's just like you saw in Idiot Boy's video. The board can draw your hand into the blade, and once your hand touches the back of this blade, your hand gets kicked back. And so it will slam it through like this, and just cut right through all your fingers. Okay? But if you have the guard and riding blade in place, right, if the board kicks back, your hand will hit this, and you'll be totally safe. So don't cut without a guard and riding knife in place, because it's dangerous and stupid, as demonstrated by Idiot Boy. Okay? All right. Any questions on the table saw? When you guys run the table saw, the rule is real simple. You may not run the saw unless I'm standing right there. If I walk away, you turn off the saw. Okay? After you've run the saw enough that I'm comfortable with it and you're comfortable with it, I'll say, yeah, you can go cut. If I tell you to go cut and you're like, I'm still not comfortable, then I'll come over and watch you make your cuts. I will not make your cuts for you. I don't do that. Okay? And he's not allowed to do that either. You have to make your own cuts. Okay? And this thing can feel a little scary at first, but after you run it a while, you recognize that it really is true. Thousands of boards go through, 3 turn into kickbacks, and almost every time it's somebody stupid not doing what I told them. If you're watching your wood, you can see it's against the fence, it'll cut through and you should be fine. Okay? Never had a kickback from a pinch, but I've had it come close. But I've always been able to hold it, turn the saw off, and correct it. Okay? So, those are the things that you need to worry about with the table saw. Okay?